I told my wife she couldn't manage without me. Now I'm the one paying the price. I used to think life was predictable, manageable. After all, I'm a guy who likes routines, who thrives on the structure I've built for myself over the years. My job was reliable. My kids, two of them, a 3-year-old boy and a slightly older daughter, seemed content enough. My marriage, though not without the typical bumps along the way, felt like a steady, well-oiled machine. That was until I made one flippant, arrogant comment to my wife that threw everything into chaos. It was a stupid thing to say, and in hindsight, I wonder if it was inevitable that my complacency would catch up to me. She was exhausted that day, juggling the kids and God knows how many other things that don't even occur to me on a regular basis. It was one of those days when the weight of everything, all the invisible work she does, must have just pressed down on her all at once. I remember walking into the living room, having just wrapped up my work from home day, and feeling immediately annoyed when she asked for a break. I hadn't even taken my shoes off yet, and already she was asking for help. I could have simply said, sure. It was such a simple request. After all, instead, like an idiot, I grumbled. I made excuses about needing to unwind after my own workday. What I didn't acknowledge, what I refused to see, was that my wife's day was far from over. She had spent it wrangling our kids, plus the neighboring kids, keeping them occupied, fed, safe, all while the background hum of her own worries must have been throbbing in her mind. Her work had closed down due to the pandemic, and she was home, on furlough, but being paid. Still, she was dealing with something new, a life she hadn't exactly signed up for. We had both agreed when we first had kids that she wanted to keep working, to have that balance, and now that balance was shattered. When she finally snapped and cursed at me, I was stunned. She hardly ever raised her voice, let alone used that kind of language with me. I was taken aback, but instead of de-escalating, I doubled down. I acted like I was right, as if the stress she was under was somehow less important than my own, as if my contribution to the family was equal to hers. I even had the nerve to tell her that I'd like to see how long she could manage without me. That comment, it's been eating away at me ever since. She didn't explode like I thought she would. Instead, after the heat of the moment cooled down, she told me to make a list of everything I had done that day to contribute to the family. And she made one too. I can still picture the 2 pieces of paper, hers a long column of tasks: meals prepared, baths given, messes cleaned, children soothed, neighbors' kids looked after. Mine was pathetically short: 1 conference call, a few emails, half-heartedly supervising some coloring time with our daughter. I was embarrassed, and I should have been. It took me days to get over that humiliation, and when I finally apologized, she accepted. I thought that would be the end of it, but things didn't go back to normal. Not even close. The first sign that something was wrong came the next morning. It was supposed to be my morning with the kids. We had a schedule that split the duties fairly evenly, or at least that's what I told myself. When I woke up and found the house already quiet, I figured maybe she was just trying to be nice. Maybe she felt bad about the argument and wanted to make peace in her own way. But then it kept happening. Day after day, she was doing everything with the kids. Breakfast, bath time, bedtime. The little rituals we used to share were suddenly gone. She didn't send them down to say goodnight to me anymore. There was no more of our son racing downstairs to ask me to read just one more book before bed. The first time I noticed it, I brushed it off. By the second time, I felt like something was off kilter. It was as though she had made the decision to completely take over and cut me out of the process. And what really unsettled me was how seamlessly she managed it. The kids barely seemed to notice. That stung. I had always thought of myself as an involved dad. I did dance pickup, I helped with dinner, but suddenly, my wife was stepping into every one of those roles without hesitation. It was as if she had been preparing for this all along, and I just hadn't seen it. What she said during our fight began to play on a loop in my mind. You wouldn't see the kids a quarter as much as you do if I didn't arrange it. And I'm done managing you. I had dismissed it at the time, but now I couldn't stop thinking about it. Was she right? Had she been the one keeping our family afloat this entire time, while I deluded myself into thinking we were equals? And worse, was she right to cut me out now? I had basically dared her to live without me, and she was doing it, effortlessly. Every evening, I came home to a house that was pristine. The kids were happy, the meals were healthy and delicious, And my wife looked radiant in a way I hadn't noticed before. She was running again, something she hadn't had the time or energy for since before our second child was born. She seemed content, and that, more than anything, filled me with dread, because I wasn't part of it. She was managing it all without me. It was like watching a slow-motion unraveling of my own relevance. I had always been proud of being a good father, a good husband, but now I felt like a guest in my own home. The sense of being replaced crept in so subtly at first, but now it was impossible to ignore. Each day, the kids relied on her more, turned to her more, while I hovered in the background, unsure of where I fit. I started to withdraw. Maybe it was out of guilt. Maybe it was because I didn't want to face the reality that I had, in a sense, engineered this situation. I didn't ask to help with bedtime anymore. I let her take the reins. And each time I stepped aside, the gap between us widened. But the more I pulled away, the more I started to see her differently. She was stronger than I had given her credit for. She had always been strong, of course. But now she was doing it all without needing me. It scared me, because it forced me to confront my own fragility. The fact that, without her, I might be lost. The kids didn't seem to notice my absence much. They still played with me, still called me Daddy. But it felt superficial. The real bond, the real connection, was between them and their mother. I became the fun dad who popped in occasionally, but wasn't essential. My wife had stepped into every gap I had left, and now there was no space for me. At first, I thought this would blow over, that she would get tired of doing it all and things would revert to the way they were. But the longer it went on, the more I realized this wasn't a phase. She had taken control, and she was doing it brilliantly. And it wasn't just the kids. She was managing the house, her own well-being, everything. She didn't need me anymore. And that's the hardest part to admit. I spent weeks in a haze, waiting for her to ask for my help again, waiting for her to admit, even just in passing, that it was hard doing it all on her own. But she didn't. The silence between us stretched on, punctuated only by the laughter of our kids, the clatter of dinner plates, and the quiet hum of life moving forward without me at the center of it. It took a while for the truth to settle in, but when it did, it felt like a punch to the gut. She could do it without me. She was doing it without me. And worse yet, I had pushed her to that point. My selfishness, my arrogance, my belief that somehow my contribution was equal to hers, had forced her to show me just how unnecessary I had become. I found myself wanting to rewind, to go back to before that fight, to the days when she still needed me, or at least pretended to. But there was no going back. She had proven something to herself, and I think to me, too, that she was capable of far more than I had given her credit for. And that realization had shifted something fundamental in our relationship. The house was quieter now. Or maybe it just felt that way because I had stopped pretending that everything was fine. The kids still loved me, but I wasn't the one they looked to when they needed comfort or guidance. I wasn't the one orchestrating their little lives. I was an extra now, an accessory to the life she had built. Not an essential piece of it. I started doing more around the house. Not because she asked me to, but because I was desperate to feel useful again. I took over some of the chores I used to avoid, cooking, cleaning, whatever I could do to reinsert myself into the routine. But it was too late. She didn't resist my efforts. But she didn't welcome them either. It was as if she had built a new world. One where she didn't need to rely on me. And I was a visitor, trying to earn my place. One evening, after another long day of feeling like an outsider in my own home, I sat in the living room, staring at the wall, lost in thought. The kids were asleep, and the house was still. My wife was in the kitchen, quietly cleaning up the dinner dishes. I could hear the soft clink of plates, the steady rhythm of her movements. I wanted to say something, to tell her how sorry I was, how much I regretted that stupid fight, that awful comment, but the words wouldn't come. What could I say that would fix this? How could I ask her to undo the independence I had forced her into? I didn't know how to go back to the way things were. Maybe there wasn't any going back. Maybe that's the thing no one tells you about marriage, that sometimes, even when you're still together, something breaks, and you can't always repair it. As I sat there, I realized what I had to do. I couldn't keep waiting for her to ask for my help. I couldn't keep hoping she would need me the way she used to. If I wanted to fix this, if I wanted to be part of her life again, I had to earn it. I had to show her that I wasn't just the man who said the wrong thing in a moment of anger. but the man who could learn from his mistakes. Who could be the partner she deserved. So I stood up, walked into the kitchen, and picked up a dish towel. I didn't say anything, and neither did she. We worked in silence, side by side, like we used to. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And maybe that's how you fix things. Not with grand gestures or dramatic apologies, but with small, quiet moments of effort, day after day. Maybe, over time, those moments can add up to something like redemption. Or maybe they won't, but I had to try. Because I love her, and because I was wrong.